Ladies and gentlemen, sit down, grab some snacks, and get ready to have your mind blown, because you're watching the ups and downs of Nicolas Cage.
Yes, thank you. Hello, and welcome to the ups and downs of Nicolas Cage, where every week we take a look at the best and the worst that Nicolas Cage has to offer. As always, I'm your host, Logan Mock, here to take you on this journey. And today is a Friday, which means we are looking at one of his lower-ranked films. Today, we are looking at 2019's Grand Isle. Grand Isle was released in 2018, directed by Stephen Camperelli, written by Ivor William Jala and Rich Ronat. The film follows Nicolas Cage and his neglected wife as they take a young man who was fixing their fence in to protect him from a hurricane. Once he's accused of murder, though, he has to expose their dark secrets in order to prove himself innocent. The film is okay. The premise is not bad. It's not that bad of an idea. I think that it could have been fleshed out a bit more. It sounds promising. It has the potential to be an interesting film, but the problem is that it isn't. It builds a sort of atmosphere of potential suspense and of mystery, but it doesn't follow through. It doesn't have the actual suspense. It's like Stephen Camperelli watched a thriller movie about a man locked in a house with some people, and he fell asleep about halfway through, then woke up at the very end and thought that he could make a similar film with that knowledge. The actors, I will say, do a good job with what they were given. The lines sometimes don't make sense, and I question the characters' motivations more than once. But for the quality of the film, the acting by all of the characters is better than I expected. Nicolas Cage does a great job in this film. He manages to pull off a convincing drunken veteran. He's able to go over the top at the times when it's needed to. It doesn't feel awkward or out of place. I mean, it's always a little bit awkward when Nicolas Cage does what he does, but it manages to fit the story and the plot well enough. The film is full of cliches. It's riddled with them. And I said before that cliches don't mean a bad movie. If the movie is able to take the cliches that it's given and manages to make something unique out of them, adds its own unique twist so that it doesn't feel like you're watching action thriller film number 285, then it can be good, as long as the film does put the effort into making it its own. This film doesn't do that. A lot like 211, it seems to hit the checklist, like, oh, they're acting mysteriously. There's something that, are we supposed to believe the narrator, or is he insane? Who's in on it? Who knows the truth? Is he overacting? It hits all of the main points you'd expect from a film of this genre, of this type, but it doesn't add anything to it. And that's never good. If your film can be summarized with the same explanation as 100 other films, then you haven't done something good. And with the cliches, with the being like every other film, and with the terrible character writing, a lot of the actions that characters do don't make sense. They make sense in the fact that you can understand how someone would be able to do it, but you don't understand why that specific person would do it, especially given what we've seen about them from the film. It also brings in a lot of elements that you think are going to connect in another way, but they don't. They bring in this character and they mention this, or he finds this thing in this room, and you think that at the end of the film that will pay off in some way, that it'll make sense, that if you go back through, watch it again, then you'll understand where it was all coming from. And this film doesn't do that. It brings in the elements, it brings in the characters, the conflicts, all the stuff that you would expect. And then when it's time for the big conclusion, it just sort of fizzles out. Because all these interesting ideas, all these plates that they had spinning in motion that could have landed into a interesting film ending just crashed. And you're left wondering, oh, why did I just spend the last hour and a half watching this film when I could have watched a better one? So overall, it's an okay film. If you have nothing better to do, it's not bad to waste a bit of your time. And with that, that ends the normal review. And after an ad break, goes into the spoiler review.
Interested in making your own podcast but not sure where to start? Anchor makes it easy. Anchor has creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. And best of all, it's free. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
So the film starts off with these two Girl Scouts going up to this big Victorian house, and the lady comes out and says, "Hey, I'll buy 2 boxes." And then she goes up to one of them and says, "Aren't you just the most beautiful thing I ever did see?" And they're a little weirded out. One girl asks what's wrong with her, and they leave. And then it puts up a timestamp card in the next scene about what year it is. It takes place in 1988. I don't know why that first scene was included first, or why it didn't have the year marker on it. Because when I first watched it, I thought that it was going to be taking place over 2 different time periods, or something in the past would affect the future, but they're both in 1988, and they just forgot to mention the first scene was part of it. In the next scene, in 1988, there's a robber who's all running through this house, and he's stealing some silver. He's stealing some jewelry from a purse. Not stealing the purse, though, because he has standards. And then Nicolas Cage comes stumbling down the stairs, points a gun at him, and says, "You picked the wrong house to rob here, partner." And the burglar jumps out of a window, runs up to a fence, and Nicolas Cage, who is an impeccable marksman, shoots him right in the back, and he falls through a fence. And then we go to a diner, and then Buddy is there, and Buddy is a father and a husband. He's pretty young. We learned that he just got out of the Marines. Not the Marines. The water ones. What are they called? I'll figure out later. And he's trying to sell something to this guy. He's saying that profits are going up and up. And we never find out about that again. We don't know who the guy was. We don't know what he was selling. We don't know what's making the profits go up and up. It's just a sign to show that he's desperate for money. Then he goes over to his wife and child, who are also at the diner, and she says to him, "You know, I believe in you. I'm sure that this whole business, whatever this business may be, is definitely going to take off. But we need money now. And he says, I know, but I believe that this is going to work. And then he says, right now, I got to go do my job. Which is a little bit weird, because she just said that they need money now, but he does have a job. I don't know what his job is. I know that part of it entails the repairing of fences, because Nicolas Cage calls over him to his house and says, hey, I need you to fix my fence. And so Buddy goes to his job that he apparently doesn't have, according to his wife, and starts to fix the fence for Nicolas Cage. And while he's there, Nicolas Cage's wife, Fancy, is there. Everyone calls her Fancy as being short for Francine. I don't like that name at all. I think it's stupid. And so Fancy goes up to Buddy, and he's like, oh my, you look like you could use some iced tea. And immediately, I knew that they were going to have an affair, because it's such a cliched movie that anytime anyone shows any interest in anyone else, you know immediately that there's going to be a little someone between them. Which is a sign that it's not good if I can figure out a major plot point based on dialogue between two characters. He drinks the iced tea. He's still working on the fence. He picks up a fence post covered in blood, somehow doesn't notice it at all. And Fancy invites him to dinner. And he says, oh, I don't know, I gotta finish my fence, and then I gotta go to my wife and child, because my child is sick, and all of that business. And then Nicolas Cage puts some beer bottles upside down on a fence post, goes up to the roof and starts shooting them with perfect accuracy. He shoots every bottle with every bullet. And Buddy, instead of being terrified or running, he says, yo man, what the heck is up with you? And then Nicolas Cage and Buddy are talking a bit at dinner. He calls him a tadpole because he was in the Navy. He wasn't in the Marines. He calls him a tadpole because he says, aren't you guys usually squids? You look more like a tadpole to me. I figured it out. He's in the Navy. Nicolas Cage is in the Marines. And on his first day, he got hit by shrapnel. He was the only one in his platoon that did. And he's upset about it because he says, I should have been there to help them. Fancy is getting a little flirtatious with Buddy. She's all like, I bet your wife doesn't know how to treat you right. It's a shame you're a well-spoken gentleman. He's not really well-spoken because he mumbles a lot and he has a pretty bad southern accent. But, you know, it's a movie. You're supposed to suspend your disbelief. And Buddy goes outside to start his car to leave because a hurricane's about to pass over and he's got to get to his wife and child quickly before anything happens. But of course, something happens. Another cliche that happens is the car doesn't start for plot purposes. And usually in those cliches, it continues that one of the bad people tamper with his car so it couldn't start. But in this case, it just doesn't start. It doesn't start for no particular reason. And with all of this, stuff happening in the film with like the lady being interested in Buddy or Nicolas Cage being like, I'm going to kill you if you sleep with my wife and stuff like that. You think that there'd be someone who's, sabotaging with the car, but it just doesn't work. So this film is just complete coincidence that it even happened, which is a little